And nobody's waiting in the waiting rooms. Should we get started?
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, welcome everybody. Tonight's session, as you know, is optimizing video and images. But before we start with that, we'll just a quick agenda overview. So we try to start about 6 p.m. and we're nearly there. We'll just go through a couple of welcomes and then we'll get on to today's topic and aim for about a 7 p.m. finish. Note that the session is being recorded. You would have seen that as you joined in. So the introductions, Will, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Will Brown. I'm one of the organisers for the Elementor Australia. So we're not Elementor Sydney anymore, we're Elementor Australia. So we've got a title increase, we've got a pay increase as well, which is good. I'm also one of the organisers of the WordPress Sydney meetup. My background is really WordPress development. I do plugin and third-party API integration with WordPress.
Thank you. John is not able to join us tonight. Julia, you want to introduce yourself? I think Julia got mute.
Sorry, guys. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Good. My name is Julia. I'm currently based in Europe. I work for a software development company, and I also have my own business, a small web agency. We do graphic design, web design, and web development and digital marketing. And I've been using Elementor for the past few years. In love, would never go back to anything else. And I'm here with these beautiful guys to help out and to learn as well as you are. So welcome, everyone.
And yeah, me, I'm the accountant in the room here, but with the hobby of web design. Been doing that for probably many years as a hobby, and basically using Elementor for the past about 3 years. So that's me. There's a code of conduct, and there's a link there if you want to have a look. But basically, being respectful, transparent, and enjoy the community. It's a big community here, and you'll be nice, and everything will be wonderful. So if you would like to introduce yourselves and maybe even what you're drinking, and yes, I've got my bottle of water here, but put up your hand or introduce yourself, and we'll carry on from there. Anybody want to start? Okay, maybe we'll move to there's Murray.
Oh, here I can. Hey everyone, I'm Murray. I'm based in Melbourne. I think I've got something in my eye, so if I keep rubbing my eyes, because I think I've just got something in there apart from an eyeball. I have been working in web since '97, done tons of different stuff, you know, just always learning as the case may be. Got onto WordPress in about 2012, 2013, something like that, just way back. And then started using tons of different page builders. Actually, I was pretty late to the game. I mean, I probably only started using page builders maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. Before then, I was just writing all my own themes and that kind of stuff, code and styling, and then started using Elementor maybe about 1.5 years ago, and it's just been insane. You know, it's just great, you know, just playing around and learning all the different stuff, and I'm still learning. I mean, there's stuff that I think that's just probably rudimentary, basic knowledge, and I'm just going, oh, that's what that's for. Now I get it. Like, please do something on custom fonts and typography, because that stuff just does my head in. I'm still learning how to get that all set up properly, but yeah, all good. That's me, you know, and I'm just here to learn, here to share, here to grow.
Welcome. Anybody else?
Suggestion.
Yeah, Thank you. Okay, so next slide. Just to talk about the Elementor roadmap. This is something new that Elementor started to publish. There's a link to it there on the screen. We'll put a link out in the chat. Yeah, the good place to go and see what's on the roadmap, what's coming next from Elementor. It's a good place to go and have a look. This is some of the current stuff that's happening at the moment. Some of the updates that have happened recently. So in the free one, there's the ability to copy between websites. It's really powerful. They're going to have a play around with that. If you develop something on one website and want it on another, copy and paste. Simple as that. Responsive background images, as you can see what's happening there. And then there's Loop Carousel widget as well in the Pro version. Join the Elementor Lovers Australia Facebook group. I think Will's going to change the name at some stage. But at the moment, that's what it's called. So go and join us on there. And now over to Will, who's going to talk to us about optimizing video images for the interwebs.
Thank you, Morris. Lorna says she's in an open office environment, so she's just listening and watching from Perth. And she's been using Elementor for several years. Excellent. Thank you, Lorna. So I'll just share my screen. There we go. The right one. It really annoys when you do a zoom and then everything just resets. There we go. Right. So I've got that, and I'll get my chat window back. Yes. Okay. So optimizing video and images for the web. Now, this is kind of related to Elementor, I guess, because you are going to be jumping in and out of videos and images for different client, different projects. But in general, you can apply this to any web project. It doesn't have to be an Elementor project for that. Well, let's see. Next. Right, we're going to start off with videos. So I thought I'd start off with the hardest one first. Videos, a little bit more difficult, a little bit more to it than images. Images is fairly straightforward. So let's kick off with the hard one first. So let's look into video formats. Now, there's lots of video formats out there, but these are the main ones that you'll probably come into contact with websites. So I've ordered these in order of what I think my preference and what I think the general preference would be for web developers. The first one is WebM. Now, it's not a relatively new file format. It's been out there for many, many years. But it's not well used in comparison with number 2, which is MP4. But I put it at the top of the list because the format itself is open source. And anything open source gets a big tick in my book. What open source means is that the source code for developing these things is out there on the web. You can look at it, you can look through all the code. There's nothing hidden. So there's no proprietary box that somebody's doing stuff and you don't know what it is. So this is important because you can look through the code and see exactly what's there. There's nothing hiding. You can change it yourself as well. So open source and loyalty free, which means you don't have to pay anyone to use that. So that gets a big tick for me. It's probably the highest video quality format that gives you the smallest sizes. And we're going to go through some of the formats of these different videos and what sort of jargons and bits mean. So that'll become a little bit clearer later on. And it's pretty much 100% browser compatible with everything. So that's why it gets all 3 green ticks. The second one is MP4. You've probably heard of that. That's probably the most prevalent video format on the web at the moment. It's got a really high compression rate, and it's got relatively small file sizes compared with the other video formats that you might come across. Things like AVI. For that, AVI is like huge files. So this WebN and MP4, the file sizes for the comparable length will be really a lot better. Murray asks, WebN and MP4, which is better for compression? There's quite a bit to compression. I'm going to cover it later on, Murray. So you'll see in general, WebN has a little bit of a push over MP4. So that's why it just pips on number one on that list. But MP4, it's designed for low bit rates and bandwidth friendly. So, you know, it's designed to be able to stream and kind of have a fallback as well. So that's why MP4 is quite popular. It was popular, it kind of rose to the prominence. So WebM just kind of slightly tipping over as far as performance and stuff. So WebM and MP4, number one and number two by a mile. So if I was to draw these in relation to their usage, WebM and MP4 would probably be quite up here, like top. WebM would be kind of down here. And then I'm on the first floor of our a house, and OG would be somewhere in the basement. Okay, so number three is OG. You might not have heard of it. Again, it's open source and royalty free. It's a lossy compression, which means that you can't have a one-to-one ratio. So you've got to have lossy compression in it. You can't just have a full quality video for that. So it's designed for streaming on kind of bandwidth compromised devices. This file sizes are relatively small, but one of the drawbacks is it's not supported by Safari. So you're basically excluding all Apple Mac users for that, which is never a good thing if you're developing a website. Number four, last one that you might come across is 3GP. Now, this was designed for 3G phones. So the files for 3GP are really minuscule, but then you get that with the poor quality and audio quality. Because they're so small, there's not a lot of stuff you can put in there. And they're not supported by HTML5 video element as well, which is what the majority of you will be developing when you're doing web applications. You're doing HTML5 video if you're including video on a web page. So those are the four kind of formats that you're going to come across with video. With 3GP, really, you're only going to be using that if your client, if your countries, you know, kind of low quality, really bad internet, and they're kind of use the mobile phone type thing. Otherwise, the other three are your best choices. Probably not with OG though, because you're gonna it's not supported by Safari, Apple Mac users. So you're really tossing up between WebN and MP4. So let's look at some compatibility. WebM, it's pretty much compatible with everything for that. So down at the bottom, you can see the latest versions of the web browsers. For this is a website called caniuse.com. So if you want to know if you can use a particular format with a browser, this will tell you all the different browser information on the version numbers and what the compatibility is like. So WebM compatibility is very good. The only one is red is IE and Opera Mini. So again, if you've got a very client niche specific client that uses Internet Explorer or Opera Mini, you might not want to use WebM, but that's not a lot of people, to be honest. So WebM's got good compatibility for the browser. MP4, the same, all green all the way across except for Opera Mini. So highly compatible. That's why these two formats are at the top. Looking at OG, we can start to see it's fairly compatible, but there you've got the Safari. It's not compatible on Apple Mac. So yeah, it's kind of a big thing if you're doing a web application to exclude all Apple users for that. And 3GP, poor little 3GP, it doesn't even have a listing on caniuse.com. As I say, it's not compatible with HTML5 video element, which only supports WebM, MP4 and OG. So again, unless you're delivering video specifically for 3G networks, don't use 3GP. And that segue leads into kind of responsive display. So I mentioned the HTML5 video element. Now that's what most of your major web page builders and Gutenberg or the WordPress block editor is going to use. So when you're dragging on a video block, a video widget in the background when it's rendering out that HTML, it's going to be using this HTML5 video element tag, and it supports WebM, MP4, and OGG formats. Now, to make this responsive, it's really, really easy. There's a little bit of an example CSS code there. Basically, the video tag, you basically want to use a percentage with it. So if you want to make your videos responsive, so that, on desktop, on tablet, and on mobile, then you apply some percentage of the CSS to that video element tag. So what we might want to do, the example here is for small tablets and small mobiles. We want that to be 100%. So we want to go from edge to edge for that. And if we tip it like that, so we can see that the full screen dimensions will work nicely if you're on a 1080p or even 720, that'll work nicely. If you've got a large screen, so I've got a super large monitor, you don't probably want to make the video full length, because the more width you use, the higher it's going to get. So if you're making your full screen desktop video element 100%, it's going to take up like the entire, it's going to be in the people's face. They won't going to be saying anything else. So in this case for here, I'm using a media query at media. I'm saying screens that are 768 pixels and larger, I'm only set to 50%. So I'm not going to do the whole screen, just 50%. But it's an easy way to do responsive display. And if you think back 5-6 years ago, before we had media at media, whereas and before the video tag, trying to make a video responsive on a web page was a nightmare. It was a pulling your hair out thing. So this is a good advancement for HTML5. For responsive display, it goes one step further. Now, with images, you have something called a source set that you can specify different image sizes for mobile devices. The HTML5 video element doesn't have source set, but it has something similar. What we have here, this is the first incarnation of what we can see. This is what we call a preference or a fallback. So in here, I've got the video element, and within it, I'm basically identifying 3 different sources. One is a WebM video, the second is an MP4, and the third is an OGG file. And what happens is I'm specifying the preference here, is that I want to preference my WebM to display, and then MP4, and then OGG. And then the web browser will use them in that order, but in order of compatibility as well. So, for example, if the browser will display the first compatible video format in this list. So in this example, if our browser didn't support WebM or MP4, then it would show the OGG video format. So if it's an older browser, it would fall back on the OGG if it didn't have WebM and MP4 capabilities for that. Now, this is the preference, as I say. So I want WebM first. So if a browser did support everything, then I'm basically telling them to use that WebM first, because that's my preference as the web developer for that. So you have a little bit of control as to which versions get displayed and the order that you want to do them. And just note that this doesn't work on video backgrounds. Video backgrounds is something completely different. This is just the video on-page video element. Now, going one step further, so 2 steps further, and still sticking to responsive display, we're now adding a different attribute to the video source. So we've got our source files. We're telling its type. So we're specifying that these is a WebM, an MP4, but we can also have media queries in that statement as well. So in this example, we're delivering a different WebM or an MP4 video for tablets who have a max width of 768 pixels for that. There's a mobile version for devices with a maximum width of 480 pixels as well. And we've got a full-size format for the desktops and above. So you can see the video sources change. So we've got a video-mobi for mobile. It's an MP4. We've got one as WebM as well. And in this instance, I'm preferencing the MP4 to be first, just to change it up. And then we've got a different one for the mobile. For that, and then we've got a full screen display at the very, very back as well. And so this is a way of mixing your media queries, bringing it out of the CSS and putting it straight into the HTML. Where do you put those codes in Elementor? Maurice, this is kind of raw HTML, so I'm kind of showing you what's happening in the background. You've dropped your video widget onto your page, you've added your video. When that page is rendering, this is what's happening in the background. Now, I'm not sure if Elementor displays, I'm not sure if you can specify all this within Elementor. I've yet to have a look at the control, so I should have a look at that. But this is what's happening in the background HTML. This is what you can do, if you're just doing HTML stuff. I'll have a look for that for you, Morris. Note again, this doesn't work with video backgrounds. So this is just like videos on page videos. Okay, so we've delivered video responsively. We saw how the HTML5 video element, we can choose the source of the videos, the type of the videos, and also the responsive, which size we can specify that on. So let's understand a little bit more about the quality and what affects quality of the video. So there's three things that determine the quality of a video. First one is frame rate. The second one is bit rate, which is actually one word, mistake there. And the third is resolution. And this is what how compression and the video sizes can vary, because it takes into factor all these three factors. So let's do the first one, which is a video frame rate. It's probably the easiest to understand. So all video is a collection of individual images or frames. A frame rate refers to the speed at which those frames are arranged to create a continuous video. That's usually defined in frames per second. So some standard frame rates are 24 frames per second. So that's most films and TV that you watch. There's 30 frames per second, which is the mainstream TV now. And there's 60 frames per second, which is mostly internet content. So the more frames that you have, so if something's running at 60 frames per second, that's going to increase the smoothness of the video. And the more frames also means the video size is going to be larger. Less frames decreases the video size because there's less frames in there. But less frames can leave your video looking a little bit jittery, especially on high definition displays. So sometimes when you see on a TV documentary, if someone's in maybe a third world country, maybe not a high-tech country, they've got their HD camera and they're spanning around the room and they're capturing someone's telly and you can see it flickering. That's because that telly is not displaying its quality at the same frame rate. It's at a lower frame rate, so you see that flickering. Now our eyes are pretty good at catching this stuff out. So if you were to try and run a 24 FPS frames per second film on a big 4K screen in 4K mode, you would see it flickering all the time because there's just not enough frames to capture that. So that's the first one they've got to take into account for quality is video frame rate. Apologies for the noise in the background. That's my 7-year-old son going crazy. Okay, the second one is video bit rate. Now, a video's bit rate refers to the amount of data a video contains. So that's the data within each frame. The higher the bit rate, the higher the quality of the video. And since it has more information to work with, that's why it's higher quality. So if you can squash more detail into it, think back to the 1980s with your 8-bit games, which were all blocky, all the kind of the blocks moving around. That's the bit rate. So it's the amount of bits inside that quality. If you expand the number of bits out, put more in, you're going to get a high quality, a higher definition video, since it's got more information to work with. Now, with video streaming, the bit rate is usually measured in megabits per second, Mbps. The higher the number, the more megabits per second the video will run in. And in an ideal world, you'd want to watch a video with as high a bit rate as possible, so you don't lose any quality. For example, Blu-rays versus just kind of regular DVDs. However, the higher the bit rate, the larger the size of video. And that's why Blu-ray discs have a different format and sometimes come with 3 or 4 discs in the pack, so that you don't lose any quality. So the larger the more higher the bit rate, the larger the size of the video. And videos are already one of the largest file sizes on the web. So if you're starting to include video in your project, you're already, talking, megabytes for those. It's certainly the large 100Ks for those. Now, good news is you can use compression to remove bits and reduce the file size. The trick with compression is to remove just enough not to affect the perceived visual quality, that's through our eyes, for that video, but more on compression in a later slide. So the third part to do with the video resolution is resolution. So sometimes it can get confused with bitrate, but they are different and they both affect the quality of the video. Now, resolution is measured in how many pixels a video contains. You might be familiar with resolution such as 1080p, which is high definition, 4K as well, and I think there's even 8K out now. Now, 1080p video, the resolution for that's the big one here. So it's 1920 pixels wide and 1080 pixels tall. While 4K, which is not on this screenshot, is 3800 pixels wide and 2100 pixels tall. So 4K video can look a lot sharper because it contains more pixels than 1080p or other resolutions like 720p and 480p, which are kind of going down to the kind of mobile size video for that. Now, when you lower the resolution of a video stream, you're reducing the number of pixels that stream is sending to the display. Therefore, it's going to affect the quality. Now, reducing pixels can be an effective way to boost performance of a stream. While your internet connection is, if it can't handle it, it might be preferable to lowering the bit rate. Now, viewers prefer to watch a good quality video at any given resolution. So the smaller resolution also means the smaller the video size. So rather than reduce the bit rate, you might want to reduce the video resolution, but keep the bit rate up so the quality of that smaller video still looks good. Okay, so again, this is why video is really technical. So I'm trying to get this one done first. So those are the three things that determine the quality of the video. So now that we understand those three things, we can have a look at video compression. Now, compression reduces a video's bitrate and therefore the overall file size. And this can result in a lower video quality, but not always a perceived video quality through our eyes. Now, for example, if a character is moving in the foreground and the background is static, the compression, the magic compression, will save that and send just the foreground part of the image and not the background for those particular sequences. However, since the background isn't changing, it just sends that one frame of the change until the image changes again in the background. So it's really kind of a clever way of saying what's not changing. Okay, I'm not going to bundle that into a frame. I'm only going to bundle what's changing and then send that as another frame. So it's kind of a tricky kind of magic. And again, the balance is to try and get as much compression so that our viewers' eyes don't perceive any difference. Because when you start reducing the bit rate, as we've seen, we can reduce the quality of the video, and our eyes are very good at figuring that. So it really depends what's in the video and what's happening. You'll find if you've got a really, really busy video that maybe you're outside, and you've got somebody moving, you've got background, you've got traffic or boats, you've got stuff in the sky, you'll find that the compression won't work as much, or you won't be able to lower it as much because there's a lot happening in the scene. If you've got somebody, if you're doing an interview, you've got a static background, you've got somebody on a chair, and you're doing interviewing questions, you can probably get quite a high video compression on that because a lot of the background is static. So we don't have to compress as much of the moving bit rates for that. So I hope that makes sense for video compression. There's some tools, or a tool that I recommend for that, and it's called Handbrake. So the URL is there. Handbrake is a free video compression tool. It works on Windows, Mac, and Linux, so it works across everything. It has lots of presets for common video formats like 480p, 720p, 1080p, and then within that, there's different frames per second. So you can have 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second, and you can change the bit rate. So all those three things we talked about, Handbrake, you can tailor that for those. You can compress one file or run it on an entire folder. It's the best tool that I've used for video compression. So if you've got a video editor, if you're handing video production over to somebody and they return 100 video files back, in 4K format, then that's no problem. you can just run this on the folder and squeeze them all down to 1080p. And, it might take a while, and your local computer CPU fan will start to scream. But it's a great tool, and it's free and works on all operating systems. So it's really good. That's one I'd recommend. Okay, so let's address the elephant in the room, which is video backgrounds. So video backgrounds, love them or hate them. I'm kind of in the hate camp, but you've not got much control if you've got client projects. Sometimes if they want a video, that's what they get. So how can you make them the best quality and optimize them properly? So here are my tips. Tip 1 is to choose your video loop and keep it very short. If you've got a video background, in general, you're probably going to have something overlaid on that video background, or you've got important stuff above or below, and you're just kind of drawing people's eyes towards that. If you want to keep it short, you probably don't want to have your viewers' attention on that loop all the time. That's probably not the important information. It could be, but probably not. So keep it very short, few seconds, 2-3 seconds in a loop, if you can get away with that. The second tip is to reduce the motion and speed. Now, you don't want to have people throwing up when they're looking at your website, or give them like vertigo and stuff. So you don't want a really busy, speedy, fast clip unless that really pertains to what the client's trying to come across. So one of the best tips for these background motions is to reduce the motion and reduce the speed. So have people just walking along slowly. It gives that kind of ethereal feel to it as well. One of my clients, they do organic grains. So they've got this little background video loop of this woman just kind of walking through a grain field, just kind of slowly brushing her hand, over the grains. It looks lovely for that. Plus, it's slowed down and it's just short loop. So that was a win. Tip 3, we go back to compression. So now we've got a short loop. Now reduce the motion and the speed. Now we want to try and compress it as much. And this is just basically trial and error. As I said, not all videos will be the same when you compress, but try and compress as much as possible. I tend to aim for 24 frames per second, which is kind of the lowest you can go for before your eyes start to see tricks and blurring and jerkiness. I tend to go for 720p. So you don't generally want high definition or 4K in the background because the files are going to be enormous. And 480p, which is the other option, is you're going to see the quality reduced in that quite a bit. So 720p is a good choice for a background. And remember to remove the audio channel as well. Even if there's no audio that comes with the video, it might still have an audio channel that's silent. That it's basically streaming to the video player, and the video player saying, okay, I've got an audio channel here, but it's got nothing, but it's still doing something. So remember to remove that audio channel completely, and then the video player won't even have to bother about that. Tip number 3, tip number 3A, I'm going to call it 3A, is to use the WordPress container, the correct container. Now, this kind of works out the box. If you're using the block editor or Elementor, you don't really have much choice about this. But basically, you try not to embed your video too deep down. So don't have like a main container and then another inner section, and then within the section you've got a grid, and within that grid you've got another column that you then put a video in. Okay, because that's embedding it way down. So we try and bring it as far up the stack as we can. So in general, if you're using the block editor, you want to use the cover block. So the cover block's good. It allows you to choose the video from the media library. It's got the least amount of HTML. It uses the HTML video tag as well. If you're not doing that, then it's the HTML block that you want to use. That gives you fine control over the code that I was showing you back before. So if you're hosting which should be your video, which I think is the next one, next tip, then you can probably grab from that video host an embed link, which then you'd see the HTML5 video tag in there. And that's the code that you would embed into the HTML block for this. If you use an Elementor, then you can use a section. Section is kind of one of the topmost elements. And then within the controls of the section, you'll see there's a background option where you can have a picture, a gradient, or there's an image one as well for that. So you click on the image and then select the image that you've uploaded to the media channel. So just try and make sure you use the right containers when you're doing those video backgrounds. So tip number 4, which should be 5, is don't self-host the video. I do come across lots of people who just drag the video up into the media library, and they're wondering why they run out of bandwidth after a week when 100 people are watching the homepage. That's why. So don't self-host video, host it in the cloud somewhere. Ideally with adaptive streaming. Adaptive streaming is the thing that YouTube watches. So if you're watching a video on your super fast broadband NBN at home, then it plays, in 4K. If you're then watching that same video on your mobile out in the middle of a field, then what adaptive streaming is, it lowers the quality down from 4K to 1080p to 720 to 480. So that's what adaptive streaming is for that. Marcus says, let's see, just tried it on a site and compared it from my own server versus YouTube, and YouTube loads many things and strips it slower than playing the video from the server. In general, I don't tend to use YouTube at all, Marcus, because it kind of sucks. It's got ads, and it's got that video playlist at the end, and as you say, it does a whole lot of other stuff. I tend to recommend Vimeo. I use Adilio from Big Command, and what you're getting from that is just the direct streaming. So you're not getting all the faff that YouTube's sending down the line as well. YouTube's good if you're trying it out for free. Of course, everyone can't afford things like Vimeo, but yep, that's the caveats with YouTube for those. Okay, tip number 5, which should be 6, is add a video schema to the page. If you don't know what schema is, then you can go to schema.org/video object. So schema.org. And basically Google looks at the video and it can't decode the video. It doesn't know what's in there. Okay. But what we can do is we can tell Google that there is a video object on there. And this is what Google uses for those rich snippets that you see that kind of pop up when you do searches. So if you want a chance of being what they call a 0-click or a rich snippet, then tell Google there's a video on your page, and make sure you've got your metadata for there. So you've got the title and stuff in there, and you've got a better chance of Google picking that up for SEO and displaying as a rich snippet. Laura, yep, Amazon S3. I used S3 for a long time for hosting videos. It is super fast. It works really, really well. The only reason I switched over to Adilio was I got a lifetime deal. That's a lifetime hosting deal with Adilio, so unlimited storage for those. And now Amazon S3 is very low cost, so you can have gigabytes of videos up there, and you're going to be charged like 10 cents a month for something because it is super cheap. So it's a really good option. It's difficult for beginners because you've got to create the Amazon S3 account. You've got to navigate to it because there's like a billion options when you log into the Amazon console. You've got to create a bucket. You've got to make it public as well. So it's not for new people, but once that's set up, it's a good option for hosting your videos on. Great question. Okay, so that's autoplay video on backgrounds. I grimace when clients ask for this, but you've got to do it. So let's make it as optimized as you can. Here's a little bit about videos and SEO for the schema here. Now I use the paid version of SEO Press, but you can do the same here with the paid version of Yoast SEO, or you can get a free plugin. It's called Schema in the WordPress plugin repository, and it does the same thing. It allows you to grab this stuff. Now, this is all in one column. I've just cut it up into 2 just so it fits nicely onto the page. So what you can see here is SEO Press. This is one of my blog posts, one of my WP Quickies blog posts. It's automatically detected that there's a video and it's applied a schema, but you can go in manually and apply the same thing. So it selected the schema data type, which is video, and then there's lots of different types. There's one for FAQ, there's one for recipes, there's one for organizations. So I'll have a look at all that sort of stuff. And here's the markup that Google can't get from just looking at the video, because it can't look inside the video. So this is the markup roundabout. We're giving it the video name, we're giving it the description, which is important for SEO, upload date if that's important, it's not there, but the thumbnail as well. So that's pulled that from the featured image from the blog post, but you can specify a separate thumbnail image for the video if that's important, and then things like the duration and the actual URL of the video as well. So this is the stuff that Google needs to start to display those rich snippets on the SEO results. So it's a good thing to have. If you got video and you don't have that, then probably a good idea to add that in just now. You should always test it as well. So this is Google's rich snippets test result here. So this is at the top, the URL of that blog post with the video in it. And it's just ran through it. It takes a couple of minutes to validate it, and it's found two structured data, two schemas. One's the breadcrumbs, yay! But then we've got the video down below. So if you are adding schemas, make sure you check it to make sure it's all working, and you can see the results that are coming back. But very, very important if you're embedding video is just to, if you want a chance of being one of those rich snippets, is to make sure you got that schema added in. Okay, that was video, and that was a long time. So let's skip through images, which isn't so big a deal. Again, with image formats, the first tip really is to, in image optimization for the web, is to know which format to use and when. So here we have some formats, some popular formats. WebP, which is web picture format. This one, I use WebP for all my on-page images, except for the featured image, which gets shared to social media sites. You'll note that some sites, notably LinkedIn, if you copy a blog post URL, it doesn't recognize a WebP. You can't upload WebPs in LinkedIn. So because I share a lot on LinkedIn, I set my featured images as JPEG. But I prefer WebP because it's the best lossless and lossy compression, and it supports animation. It's got smaller files, for the same or better quality than JPEG or PNG. So the second one is JPEG or JPEG. It stands for Joint Photographic Experts Group. That's good. Now, I've largely replaced all my JPEGs with WebP on page, but I still use JPEG for my blog post featured images because of that social sharing. Now, so it's a 90% of my pictures on my blog posts and my pages are all WebP, but featured images still are JPEG, so I can share that stuff. Lossy compression for relatively small file size. WebP pips it, so WebP will produce smaller file sizes in 90% of the cases for that. And then, JPEG's close behind. It's got universal browser support for that. JPEG's been around for a long time. However, some of the lossy compression can lead to poor text readability. So if you've got text within your graphics, you might not want to use a high compression rate or a low compression, more compression on JPEG, because that text within there can suffer. And this is where PNG or portable network graphics come in. So PNGs, they have a lossless compression, which means it's a 1-to-1 bit rate. So you can choose that. So it's doing no compression at all, and it maintains detail. It's actually specifically good for color contrast. This is what makes PNG good for text readability within images. You'll tend to find a lot of graphic designers, when you outsource, if you're asking them to put text within an image, it will come back as a PNG, and the rest will come back as a JPEG. That's usually why graphic designers will tend to go towards PNG if they've got text in the background. The downside of those is it's larger file sizes than JPEG or WebP. So it's that's what you've got to take into consideration. Number 4 is SVG. That stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. Now, whereas 1, 2, and 3, WebP, JPEG, and PNG, they're called raster images, which means the format of them are just pixels, like rows of colored pixels. Whereas SVG is actually a markup language. It's not pixel file at all. It's actually a language, an XML language. So it renders a 2D image within the browser based on this XML markup that basically tells you, take this one point, make to another point, make this other point, make a loop here, and that's how you build up the image in the XML markup file. So no pixels, and it means it's really, really small in size. Whereas your WebP might be really good at a couple of 100Ks, your SVG is going to be 1K for like a huge file. So it's really, really good at small size. It scales without losing quality. So you can go from mobile, you can go to desktop, you can go to conference monitor size, and it's not going to lose any quality at all because it's not pixels. Okay, it's mathematically generated. However, it's a bit complex for designers to create. And I use SVGs for logos. For those, they're a bit of a pain to create. I'm not a designer. So I either get the client to provide those or I outsource that to a designer. But definitely all my logos are SVG format, as they should be, because if a company's using a logo, they might want it, on their mobile website page, but they might want it on the side of their van or truck and stuff. So it needs to be scalable. The last one is GIF. I thought I'd pop that on there just for a laugh. GIFs, graphics interchange format. It's a lossless compression, so you've got compression right out of the bat. You can't have you can't have like non-compressed for that. It supports animations as well, so that's why it was used a lot 10, 20 years ago on those. But it has some major limitations. It's only got 8 bits per pixel, and it's limited for the color palette to only 256 colors. And if you start including animations, you're going to get huge file size. And that's why you get all these crappy memes, with dancing cats and stuff. And they're funny, and that's why people use them. But for a quality production, no, you don't use that. So unfortunately, GIFs have been reduced to memes only. So those are your main formats that they're going to be choosing. And this is why it's important to know the differences, because, the first tip in optimizing is to know which web format to use in your particular project and when. So let's have a look at image file size and dimensions, optimal sizes. So the ideal image file size for your website should be less than 500K. You don't really want to be serving anything over 500K for an individual image file with a limit of 20 megabytes. That's crazy. 10 megabytes. That's just a crazy size for an individual image. But sometimes, sometimes like an infographic, sometimes circumstances, you can't get away from that. But, ideally, you don't want to be serving anything higher than 10 megabytes on a single page for that. The dimensions of the original image width should be between 1500 and 2500. So that's 1500 and 2500 pixels for desktop. And 640 by 320 for mobile devices there. Now, most people, the reason for that size is that most people run HD, so that's 1080p desktop monitors, and that resolution is 1920 by 1080. So the 1500 there gives a nice resolution for that, so your image stays nice in the center of the monitor with having just a little bit of padding down the sides for those. That's a very common 1440 is a very common size for desktop now. And the reason for the 2500, well, that's your Retina pixels. That's all your Apple Mac people. You use, the ridiculously high desktop resolutions. So you're going to have to, if you're serious to get that audience, you're going to have to produce Retina images as well. But again, your kind of top resolution is you're looking for 2500 to display nicely on desktop Retinas. Okay, so the max width in desktop is mostly going to be determined by your client's theme and the page containers that they're on. If they want to run all the way to the edge to 1920, that's up to them. But again, a popular size is 1440 or 1500 for the desktop size. Let's have a look at image compression. So you're going to need to play around with this, similar to video. You need to play around with your image compression levels to determine what works best for you and for your client and for that particular image. Some compressed images are going to be perceived better quality by your eyes than others. So JPEG offers a better level of compression than PNG. For PNG, the compression rate is 0, which means no compression, and 9 is a maximum compression. Now, I find that with PNGs, if I run with a maximum compression, the file size stays pretty much the same, regardless of using 0 or 9. So you might get 1 or 2K out of it, or even less than that. So that's why I don't really bother with compression with PNG, because it's just not worth it. You don't get a good file size return on that reduction in file size. Saying that, I find for JPEG, around 70 to 75% compression works well for most images. Now, what I've got here is I've got 3 images. The first one is a PNG for no compression. The next one is a JPEG with 70%. And the next one, I think, is a JPEG with 25. So I'm going to flick through them just so you can see the quality. So this is the first one, PNG with no compression at all. This is a JPEG with 70%. Now, you can't see very much difference. I'll just flip back. So Once I start flicking, you can start to see the differences. But if you just go into that one, then there's not a lot of perceived difference in the quality. And you're reducing it by 30%, which is a pretty good gain in file size. Now I move on to this one, which is JPEG at 25. Now again, you can start to see some what they call artifacts coming in. So if I go from the 70 to 25, if I flip between those, you can see the ice cube's a bit blurry, the dice are a bit blurry, the vase in the background is starting to lose its definition a bit for those. So again, no compression, 25, no compression, 25. Some images you can get away with, some images you can get away with less compression, some with more compression. You just have to play around with it. Generally, I keep to between 80 to 70%. I get good compression with that, because that's not too bad compared with that. You can kind of get away with that for most stuff, but 25%, I wouldn't be happy doing that. I know that Morris has got to head off. So Morris, if you need to head off at 7, yes, that's fine. I can close out on this. Okay, so image tools for converting. Here's some handy tools that I use. This one's called XN Convert. It's free. I think there's a pro upgrade, but I've never ever used it. This is good for batch conversion. Again, if you outsource all your files to a designer and they come back in one format, in JPEG or PNG, and you want to format them all over to WebP, this is a great tool for doing it. Just point at a directory and give it your different dimensions of what you want it to do, and it just converts them all. So I love this little tool. It's never let me down I just love that. So XN Convert. Other tools I use the Affinity set. So I've moved away from Photoshop over the past year, or from Adobe, and I use these Affinity tools now. Now this one here does everything that Photoshop does for much less money. No subscription, one-time payment. You can load, save, and convert PSD files, that's Photoshop files. You can save it as WebP, JPEG, PNG. You got layering, you got all the fancy stuff that Photoshop has with, a fraction of the price. I think I paid around about $300 US, a one-time payment, and that was for the whole suite. So that was for the Photoshop. It was for this one as well, which is the Affinity Designer, and I've got one for documents as well. But this one here I've been using. So this is a replacement for Adobe Illustrator. No subscription, one-time payment again. And again, it can load and save, convert Adobe.ai files for those, and it has all the goodies that Adobe AI has as well. So I'm loving those at the moment. Some good tools for those. I'll try and circle back around to some of the questions in a minute because I'm almost done. Some more tips on performance. Note that note you should be resizing images before uploading. So I've just got a little note here. Otherwise, you're putting unnecessary strain onto your web server. So don't have these plugins like Smush or something. Don't be uploading from your Samsung Galaxy S23 right to your website. That's just crazy, because then your web servers then got to go through the process of compressing and reducing it, and web servers shouldn't be doing that. So do all your stuff on local, then load it up to the web server. You can use a CDN. So CDNs are really good for improving image delivery speed. Here's a quick example at the background. So the first one is no CDN. The next one is with a CDN. So with no CDN, you've got all your clients, all your web browsers all over the planet are going to one server, and they're pulling all the information. Whereas your CDN stores bits of files in different locations all over the planet. So it's a lot faster for that. So you can use Cloudflare. You can use the free version. I use that on some of my sites and some of my client sites. That's no problem. I've actually got my own sites hosted on Wordify.com, and they use something called Bunny CDN, which I hadn't heard of before until I used them. So that's bundled within the Wordify hosting package. But you might want to have a look at them. It's an alternative option. It's a paid option if you want to do that. So there's a couple of options there for you. I get asked about lazy loading a lot when talking about image optimization. And since version 5.5 of WordPress, it lazy loads images by default, so you don't need a plugin. Lazy loading is where images are only loaded into the viewport, which is what you can see. So from the top to the mobile to the bottom of the mobile, from the top of your browser, your monitor to the bottom of your monitor, your browser, that's a viewport. So it only loads the images within that area. And then once you start to scroll, then it loads stuff up or down. And that's basically what lazy loading is for that. Another thing you should look at is media settings. So ensure that WordPress is generating the correct size of images for thumbnail, medium, and large sizes. If you don't need one of these sizes, a tip is to set the max with the max height to 0. And then that means that WordPress will not generate that particular thumbnail size when you're uploading files to the media library. Yeah, and that's going to save your web server a bit of CPU and a bit of disk space as well. We did video and SEO. This one is images and SEO. This is the last slide. You'll be glad to hear. Some things to note. They have just got note, resize your images for uploading. But this is the general WordPress block editor at the side here. So if we're in the media library here. Have a look at this. So what we should be doing here is we want to make sure we're using alt tags, which has our SEO keywords in there. So move WordPress to another host, or the how to move WordPress, which is the key for this blog post here. So make sure that's in alt text, make sure it's in the title, and make sure you use your keywords in your file names as well. So don't just have file 1, file 2, file 3. Put in your SEO keywords right at the beginning of the title for the file name for that, just to give that extra boost, because all these little things add up. If you've got Google looking at your web page, if you've got your H1 tag that says how to move WordPress, if you've got your subheading that says how to move WordPress, you've got your keyword that says how to move WordPress, and then if you've got all your images that start with how to move WordPress, then Google has no option but to figure that that's what this article is about. All those small points build up as for compound SEO. Okay, I talked really fast there. That's it. That's I went through video optimization. I went through image optimization, some tips for those. I will now get rid of this sharing, get back to you lovely people, and I'll cycle through some of the questions that I missed a little bit. And I'll have a drink of wine.
There was a question on thumbnails, Will.
Thumbnails. Let me just scroll up.
Yep.
From Marcus.
Yes.
If I know that an image is most likely only used in a small container, I could, of course, just scale it but before uploading, but perhaps this is not necessary as it anyway grabs the most appropriate thumbnail size. Yes, so when you are uploading images to WordPress Media Library, then those 3 thumbnail sizes that I showed you, the thumbnail, the medium, and the large, WordPress will generate a file for those. You can add custom, what they call thumbnail sizes, and a lot of themes do this. So you'll see, a custom size. If the theme has particular weight displays blog posts, then it will usually generate a couple of what we call thumbnail sizes for those. And when WordPress delivers that image out to your blog post, you will, if you have a look at the source code, you will see the image HTML tag, and then you'll see src set, which is source set. And that tells the web browser if you get this particular resolution, then just serve that particular resolution of the image. And that's the way that the HTML source set works. And WordPress does that out of the box. It's done that for quite a while. I think probably over a year to do that. So you don't need to specifically grab a particular image for a particular container. WordPress will work it out depending on the resolution of the device that you're looking at. Murray likes Affinity as well. A good thing about Adobe, if you are using Adobe, then if it's coming up for your renewal, tell them you don't want to renew it. Tell them you want to cancel it, and then you will get a very frantic engineer. Like go in the chat, you'll get a very frantic engineer that will come back to say, whoa, we don't want you to go. How about, if we just do it for this price? And then you say to them, nah, I really, I just can't afford even half of that. And they'll have that for you. So I got my Adobe full package down to $43 a month for that, which is about a quarter of the price or a third of the price for that. So definitely haggle. It's worthwhile haggling if you want to still stick with Adobe. Let's see. Okay. Marcus says, a tip, install a plugin at the very beginning of each project to automatically set the alt tag and title tag once uploaded. Yep, you can do that. However, well, yes, you can do that. However, in most instances, you'll see that file names have an underscore or a dash rather than a space for that. So generally, you don't want that in your, for SEO, you want, the English with a space in there. So unless your file names have spaces, which you generally don't, because a lot of people run Mac, and Mac doesn't like spaces on the file names. So you'll get a lot of the underscore and dashes back from your graphic designers for those. Otherwise, yes, it could be a good time saver for that. The plugin takes care of it. Excellent. Cool. I like that. Yeah, it's a good idea. If there are any other questions, then unmute, drop them into chat. Julia, did I miss any?
No, you're all good.
All good.
Everything.
Cool. Okay, so now all your web projects should be fully video and fully image optimized from this day onwards.
I was just going back to the very beginning. I think the only we had only one question from Murray saying, do we then need to include a code widget? While you were talking about the video
yes,
and the HTML5.
If you want to do it manually, I'm sure Elementor will probably do it. I just haven't looked at that particular widget. But in general, you'd be using the HTML widget. So the HTML widget, I think that's what it's called in Elementor. I don't think it's called code. I think it's called HTML. And in Gutenberg or the block editor, there's an HTML block as well. So you should be using that.
I was going to say, I was just pointing at that when I've hit snags like that where I can't embed parameters, I've just written it in code. I've just gone, what code does it need to is Elementor going to generate? I'll just write it in a HTML block and just drop it straight into Elementor, and then I'll get exactly what I want. So I was just sort of pointing that sometimes I find, like when I think someone asked about how do I actually put those as like the extra video formats in Elementor, it's like, well, you can't sometimes get it exactly how you want, but if you know the HTML that you need to generate, then you can just write it in a code block and just drop it in, and then it won't be automated. You might have to go in and manually edit it, but at least you'll get exactly what you're after. So
yeah, totally. Okay, if there's no other questions before you'll go, just next month, April 6th, 6 p.m. I'm going to be talking about Elementor versus block editor for writing blog posts. Now, this comes up a lot in the forums. Should I be writing my blog posts in Elementor, or should I be writing them in the block editor? It's a good question, and there's pros and cons for each, and I'll go through those next month. Other than that, thank you very much, lovely people. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for sticking along. It was quite a long session tonight. And I will see everyone next month. If you've got any questions, jump in the Facebook group, ask them away. I'll post this up to the Facebook group, along with all the links and stuff, and the meetup group as well. So you'll get all the presentation, the links in the video as well once I render it and compress it and get the right resolution and stuff like that. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. See you next time.
Thank you, Will.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.